Ancient stone circles guard the secrets of our first global economy. By the end of this journey, you will understand how these silent stones reveal a prehistoric world already connected by vast trade routes. Why would cultures separated by oceans build nearly identical monuments? And what precious cargo traveled between them long before history was written? What does this hidden network say about our own interconnected world today? The first rays of sun touch a single standing stone, casting a long shadow across a field untouched by time. This scene repeated itself thousands of years ago as communities across the globe began a monumental task. From the windswept coasts of Europe to the dense forests of Asia and the vast plains of Africa, people were moving mountains, one massive rock at a time. This was the dawn of the Megalithic Age, a period beginning over 6,000 years ago when humanity started to erect structures of colossal stone. These were not random acts of brute strength. The similarity in their methods and designs is a powerful clue. Archaeologists like Colin Renfrew point to a shared cultural phenomenon, a set of ideas so compelling it spread across continents. The stones were often arranged with precise alignments to the solstice sun or the rising moon, a complex understanding of the sky that could not have been invented independently by every isolated village. This shared knowledge had to travel. Consider the sheer effort. At places like Stonehenge in southern England, the smaller bluestones were hauled from quarries over 150 miles away. This was not a local construction project. It was a societal undertaking requiring organized labor, advanced planning, and a network capable of moving tons of stone across incredible distances. What vision united them, and what language did they use to share the blueprints for the heavens? The answers are not written on the stones themselves, but in the very materials they chose to build with. These silent stone sentinels did more than just track the stars. They guided the feet of travelers and the flow of goods across the ancient world. Think of a merchant, not with a map, but with the memory of a particular ring of stones silhouetted against the horizon. That circle was a beacon, a known waypoint on a journey that might stretch for hundreds of miles. The long, straight rows of the Karnak stones in France, for instance, do not point at random. They align with ancient paths that were used for centuries to move prized flint from northern mines and gold and amber from Baltic shores. The stones themselves were the signposts. The proof is in the ground, right at their feet. Archaeologists digging around these circles consistently find objects that have no local origin. A beautiful piece of obsidian, a volcanic glass sharper than any modern steel, found at a site in Europe, can be chemically traced all the way back to a single mountain in Turkey. How did it get there? It was traded hand to hand over vast distances, and these stone circles were often the very places where that exchange happened. Their locations are rarely accidental. They cluster near coastlines where boats could land, along river valleys that served as natural highways, and most tellingly, near deposits of valued resources like high-quality stone for axe heads or deposits of rare minerals. This was not just practical, it was synchronized with the cosmos. The astronomical alignments built into the circles served a dual purpose. Yes, they marked the solstices for ritual, but they also marked the seasons for trade. The summer solstice might signal the start of the annual gathering, when the weather was good for travel and different groups would know to meet at a specific circle. It was a shared celestial calendar that everyone could understand. Consider the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland, standing proud on a thin strip of land between two lochs. This was not an isolated temple. It was a central hub on a route used for trading polished stone axes, items of immense value and utility. People would come from far and wide, not only to exchange goods but to share news, forge alliances, and participate in ceremonies. So why did traders choose these sites? Because they were already places of importance, of neutral ground and shared belief. The ritual sanctified the trade, and the trade enriched the ritual, weaving commerce and culture into a single, unbreakable fabric. The stones themselves speak a common language. From the wind-swept moors of Britain to the sun-baked plains of India, the same architectural grammar appears again and again. A visitor from ancient Sardinia would have recognized the basic form of a dolmen in Korea, a simple structure of massive upright stones capped by a single, heavy horizontal slab. How could such distinct cultures, separated by thousands of miles of ocean and desert, arrive at the same sophisticated designs? The answer is not that they all thought the same way, but that they were all connected. These shared blueprints are the archaeological equivalent of finding the same brand logo on products from different continents. Anthropologist Marija Gimbutas championed the idea that these forms, often linked to tombs and monuments for the dead, carried profound symbolic weight. The dolmen, a stone womb in the earth, and the towering menhir, a phallic symbol of life, together represented a cycle of death and rebirth. This powerful set of beliefs did not simply bubble up independently everywhere. It was a package of ideas that traveled, likely alongside the physical goods moving along trade routes. The traders themselves became the unwitting missionaries of a megalithic culture, carrying not just obsidian and amber, but stories, rituals, and the very plans for how to honor the ancestors and the cosmos. The evidence is in the precise details. Look at the Callanish stones in Scotland, a complex cross-shaped setting of stones with a central ring. Nearly identical formations have been identified in the Middle East, suggesting a shared understanding of not just the circle, but of more complex symbolic arrangements. This is not about mere functionality. A circle is a simple shape. This is about a specific, codified way of building that held meaning, and it was adaptable. Communities used the local stone, but they shaped it according to a received template, blending the imported idea with local beliefs and resources. This architectural unity points to a stunning reality. A global dialogue was happening in stone, a conversation that connected humanity millennia before the great age of exploration. But the most direct evidence arrives not from the stones, but from the earth beneath them. Excavations at these ancient sites consistently uncovered treasures that tell a story of astonishing reach. Picture an archaeologist's trowel carefully brushing away soil to reveal a delicate seashell, a cowrie from the warm Mediterranean, resting in the dark earth beside a stone circle in cold, inland Germany. This single object is a whisper from a traveler who crossed mountains and rivers. These were not just local trinkets. The deposits include jade from the high Alps, polished into gleaming axe heads and found in tombs across France. They include copper from the island of Cyprus, shaped into prized tools and ornaments that ended up hundreds of miles from their source. These exotic materials were luxury goods, items of immense social and spiritual value, and their presence at these specific locations is no accident. Archaeologists find them placed as deliberate offerings, buried in the sacred ground of the circles or within the tombs associated with them. This act connected the physical act of trade with the spiritual realm, blessing the exchange. Even everyday items tell a foreign tale. Pottery shards found at a site might carry designs and manufacturing techniques unique to a region far away. A simple tool, a scraper or an arrowhead, might be made from a type of flint or obsidian that can be chemically traced to a single quarry across the sea. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found with these artifacts firmly places this vibrant exchange in the heart of the Neolithic era. long before the wheel was invented or metals were commonly smelted. Consider the journey of a single piece of amber. This golden, fossilized resin, warm to the touch, was gathered on the shores of the Baltic Sea in northern Europe. Yet, centuries later, it was found carefully placed within a stone circle in Greece. Think of the countless hands that passed this precious object along, the stories told, the deals struck across a continent. A case study at the Great Circle of Avebury in southern England reveals a similar story. Here, archaeologists have uncovered goods that originated in continental Europe, proving that this was not an isolated community, but a participant in a cross-channel network. These materials did more than just enrich local chieftains, they transformed cultures. The arrival of a new type of pottery or a superior metal tool could change local technologies and artistic styles. The stone circles served as the distribution points for these innovations, the neutral ground where new ideas were introduced alongside new goods. They were the bustling marketplaces and sacred temples rolled into one, the very nodes of a burgeoning global economy that connected the ancient world in a web of exchange long before the first written word. The astronomical alignments of these circles were more than just a celestial clock. They were the engine of commerce. A merchant arriving at a site like Newgrange in Ireland on the dawn of the winter solstice would witness a spectacular event. As the sun crests the horizon, its rays would pierce through a specially constructed roof box, flooding the inner chamber with a beam of light that illuminated the darkest day of the year. This was not merely a religious spectacle. It was a signal, a date stamped on the sky that told everyone from distant regions when and where to meet. The solstice meant the annual gathering had begun. This precise timing was vital for trade. Goods like surplus grain, salt for preserving food, or young livestock had specific seasons when they were available for exchange. The heavens provided a calendar that everyone, regardless of their local dialect or customs, could understand and agree upon. The Geochemical Circle in Germany, one of the oldest known solar observatories, perfectly demonstrates this principle. Its concentric rings of wooden palisades aligned with the sunrise and sunset of both the winter and summer solstices. When the sun lined up with those southern gates, it marked the shortest day, a time to gather, trade the year's bounty, and plan for the spring. How did this complex knowledge spread so widely? The answer lies with the traders themselves. As they moved along established routes with their precious cargo of amber or copper, they carried the blueprints for these celestial calendars. They explained how to sight the rising sun against a particular notch in the stones, turning an abstract concept of time into a physical, communal experience. Oral traditions from various cultures hint at these grand solstice meetings, where tribes would put aside differences to trade, arrange marriages, and strengthen alliances under the watchful eye of the aligned stones. This shared astronomical language created a synchronization across continents, ensuring that a farmer in Brittany and a miner in the Alps were operating on the same schedule, fueling an economic network that ran with the rhythm of the cosmos. The stones did not stand alone in the landscape, they lived in the stories of the people. Long after the last trader departed, oral traditions kept the memory of these routes alive, woven into the very fabric of mythology. Across the Celtic world, tales persist of fairy paths, invisible roads that powerful spirits used for their nightly travels. These stories are more than whimsy. When mapped, these legendary paths often trace the exact course of ancient trackways, marked by standing stones that served as waypoints and portals. A traveler would know to follow the line of stones, not just as a physical guide, but as a path blessed by the spirits, a safe conduit through a dangerous world. This connection between story and stone is a global phenomenon. In indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories, the ancestors themselves traveled vast distances, and their journeys are marked by sacred stone arrangements that also happen to align with paths to quarries for precious ochre or sources of water. The stones are a physical memory of that epic travel. Even the epic of the Greek hero Odysseus, who was said to have sailed past the giant stones of the Laestrygonians, may be a distant cultural echo of real encounters with the megalithic structures dotting the Mediterranean coast. Folklorists see these myths as a complex encoding of practical knowledge, a story about a hero who followed a talking stone to a land of plenty might actually be a set of directions passed down through generations for finding a source of high-quality flint or a sheltered cove for trade. The stones themselves became characters in the narrative, spirits that guided and protected those who knew their secrets. A powerful example comes from the Micho tomb in Orkney. This magnificent stone chamber, older than the Egyptian pyramids, was later broken into by Vikings. They left behind runic graffiti, not just their names, but stories of a great treasure they had found there. This was not necessarily a chest of gold. The real treasure may have been the tomb's enduring role as a landmark and a known repository of wealth and power, a place that attracted travelers and plunderers for millennia, reinforcing its position on a map of both legend and commerce. These shared stories from Africa to the Americas, where creation myths often involve ancestral beings turning into stone, created a powerful social glue. When two groups met at a circle, they were not just strangers. They were people who already knew a version of each other's stories. They shared a mythological landscape, a common understanding of how the world worked, which made the act of trade more than a simple transaction. It was a reaffirmation of a shared human experience, a bond forged not just by the exchange of goods, but by the exchange of meaning, ensuring that the memory of the routes would long outlive the people who walked them. The silent stones can finally name their homeland. Geochemical analysis, a kind of geological detective work, now reveals the exact quarries where these massive stones began their journeys. Scientists use tools like portable X-ray fluorescence to read a rock's unique elemental fingerprint. Every stone formation has a specific chemical signature, a blend of minerals and isotopes as distinctive as a human fingerprint. By comparing the stones in a circle to samples from known quarries, they can pinpoint the origin with stunning accuracy. The most famous case is Stonehenge's smaller blue stones. For centuries, their source was a mystery, but geologists like Richard Bevins have proven they came from the Preseli Hills in Wales. That is a straight-line distance of over 140 miles. This was not a casual trip to a nearby field. It was a monumental logistical operation. Moving multi-ton stones across such a vast and often rugged landscape required a sophisticated support system, a network of pre-established paths, skilled labor, and a society capable of organizing such a feat. The stones themselves are proof of the route's existence. This pattern repeats across Europe. The massive sandstone blocks used in the ancient temples of Malta were not local. Their chemical composition matches quarries in Sicily across a treacherous stretch of the Mediterranean Sea. This means someone was loading colossal stones onto boats and sailing them over open water. In France, stones found in circles far from the mountains have been traced to specific outcrops in the Alps. This hints at a previously unknown alpine trade network, where these prized stones were just one commodity among many moving through high mountain passes. How did they manage it? The methods were as ingenious as they were arduous. We know from archaeological evidence and experimental reconstructions that they likely used a combination of wooden sledges, rollers made from logs, and rope made from natural fibers. For water transport, they would have used large, stable rafts or simple boats, timing their journeys with the seasons and currents. The coordination required speaks of a highly organized economic system. It was not just about moving a rock, it was about managing teams of workers, securing food and supplies for a journey that could take months, and navigating a landscape through territories of other groups. This was not a random act of devotion, it was a calculated investment. The value of a stone from a distant, sacred mountain was immense. It carried the power of that far-off place, making the circle not just a local monument, but a tapestry woven from the very fabric of the continent, a permanent record of connection written in geology. The final resting places within these circles reveal a world where status was measured in miles. When archaeologists open a tomb sealed for millennia, they do not just find bones. They find a life story told in objects, a biography written in amber, gold, and stone. At sites like Neolithic in Ireland, a chieftain was buried not only with locally crafted gold ornaments, but also with beads of Baltic amber. This single grave contains a map of his influence. The gold speaks of his local power and resources, while the amber, a trinket that journeyed from the cold northern shores of Europe, proclaims his reach into distant networks. He was not just a local leader, he was a man of the world, a node in a global system. These exotic imports were the ultimate status symbols. Why was a piece of amber or a sliver of Mediterranean ivory so precious? Its value came from its story. A local flint axe was practical, but an axe made of jade from the distant Alps was a piece of a far-off mountain, a fragment of a legendary journey. It proved that its owner had connections, that he could acquire what no one else could. This created a new kind of power dynamic. Control over trade routes meant control over the flow of these prestigious goods, and therefore control over social standing. The stones that marked their tombs were a public declaration of this imported wealth, a permanent billboard advertising the family's global connections. Archaeologist Michael Parker Pearson sees these tombs as more than just graves. They were centers for the living to display wealth and forge alliances, with the ancestors as silent partners in the enterprise. A powerful case comes from the La Hague tomb on the island of Jersey. Here, goods buried with the dead clearly originated from across the water in France. This was not an isolated community. It was a maritime trading post, a gateway. The people buried there were likely the brokers who facilitated the movement of goods between the continent and the islands, and their high status in death reflected their crucial role in life. They were the original global entrepreneurs, and their wealth, gathered from across the sea, was their ticket to immortality, buried with them under the watchful gaze of the stones. The stones carry more than just geological fingerprints. They bear the marks of a shared language. Scratched into the weathered surfaces of megaliths across Europe are symbols that echo across vast distances, a silent testament to cross-cultural conversations. In Ireland, the angular lines of Ogham script appear on standing stones, a system of notches that some linguists believe was influenced by contact with the Roman world. Far to the north, the runes of Scandinavia tell a similar story, their characters evolving from alphabets used in continental Europe. These were not isolated inventions. They are linguistic clues pointing to a world where ideas traveled as freely as goods. The similarities can be startling. Certain symbols found carved on stones in France and Portugal bear a curious resemblance to Egyptian hieroglyphs, not as a direct copy, but as a distant echo. This suggests a slow, indirect exchange of concepts, where a symbol for a god or a commodity might be adapted and reinterpreted as it passed from one culture to the next along the trade routes. Traders were the carriers of these writing systems, a merchant sealing a clay tablet with a mark to denote the contents of a shipment was using a form of proto-writing. This practical need to record transactions, to mark ownership, or to denote the origin of goods drove the development of these symbols. Linguist John Collis argues that these early marks on stone and clay represent a widespread system of communication used to facilitate commerce across cultural boundaries. They were the shipping labels and invoices of the ancient world. Consider the enduring mystery of the Phaistos disc, a clay tablet from Crete covered in stamped symbols that has never been fully deciphered. Intriguingly, some of its unique symbols, like a shielded head or a boat, have been found in stone carvings as far away as the Alps. While its message is lost, its imagery is not, suggesting a shared visual vocabulary that transcended spoken language. How did writing itself facilitate this vast network? A simple mark could guarantee the quality of a piece of copper or certify that a block of salt came from a trusted source. It built trust between people who did not speak the same tongue. These carvings are the final, compelling thread, weaving together geology, astronomy, and now language into a single, undeniable narrative of a world that was connected long before we ever thought possible. The very soil beneath these ancient monuments remembers a different world. Archaeologists now sift through the earth itself, extracting pollen grains preserved for millennia in the mud. These tiny, nearly invisible particles are time capsules, each one telling a story of the plants that once grew there. By analyzing these pollen records, scientists can reconstruct entire ancient landscapes, revealing not a barren wilderness but a managed environment rich with resources that fueled trade. A stone circle standing today in a lonely, windswept field might have been the center of a thriving agricultural zone 6,000 years ago, surrounded by fields of domesticated wheat and barley. This abundance of grain would have been a powerful magnet for trade, drawing in communities from poorer soils who offered flint, pottery, or precious stones in exchange for food. The location of these circles was no accident of superstition. They were positioned with a keen economic eye, often in ecological border zones where different resources met. A circle on a coastline would have access to the sea's bounty, its people trading dried fish, salt, and decorative shells with inland groups for timber, animal hides, and grain. The methods of environmental archaeology are like reading a diary written in mud and pollen. Scientists take core samples from lake beds and peat bogs near megalithic sites, pulling up long cylinders of sediment. Each layer represents a different era, and by studying the types of pollen trapped in each layer, they can chart how the vegetation changed over centuries. A sudden spike in grass pollen, for instance, indicates land was cleared for pasture. A decline in tree pollen followed by an increase in cereal grains signals the arrival of farming. This data reveals how human activity and trade transformed the landscape. In the Sahara, stone circles that now stand in utter desolation were once vibrant hubs on the edges of lush oases. Their pollen records show they were built during a wetter climatic phase when the desert bloomed, and they served as waypoints on trade routes crossing the green Sahara. Paleoclimatologists like William Ruderman use this evidence to show how our earliest economies were intimately tied to the climate. During the warm, wet periods of the Neolithic, trade networks expanded, reaching farther than ever before. When the climate turned drier and harsher, as it did around 4,000 years ago, these networks contracted, and some circles were abandoned as trade routes shifted to follow the retreating water and fertile land. The stones were stable points in an unpredictable world, their permanence a guarantee of meeting places even as the environment changed around them. Consider the Almenda's cromlech in Portugal, one of the oldest stone circles in Europe. Environmental studies confirm it was not built in an empty landscape. It was situated in a region rich with copper deposits. The pollen evidence shows significant deforestation in the area contemporary with the circle's use, a strong indicator of mining and smelting activities. This circle was not just a temple, it was the heart of an early industrial zone, a place where the valuable new technology of metal was controlled and traded. Why did environmental factors dictate these locations so absolutely? Because survival and prosperity depended on them. A circle built near a reliable salt spring, a vital resource for preserving food, would naturally become a center of commerce. The stones provided the neutral, sacred ground, but the land itself provided the reason for people to gather. These environmental clues complete the picture, showing us that the first global economy was not an abstract network of ideas, but a physical system rooted in the very grass, water, and stone of the ancient earth. Beneath the vast northern sky at the stones of Stenness, the air would have been thick with the scent of roasting meat and the murmur of different languages. This was more than a sacred gathering. It was a vibrant marketplace where spirituality and commerce were one and the same. A farmer from a distant valley might lead a prized young bull into the circle, not merely as a sacrifice to the ancestors, but as a living offering to be bartered. In return, he could receive a gleaming axe head made of jadate from the Alps, a tool that was both supremely practical and imbued with the power of a far-off mountain. The ritual sanctified the trade, transforming a simple economic transaction into a sacred covenant. These grand communal feasts, evidenced by vast deposits of animal bones and broken pottery found at sites across the Orkney Islands, were strategically timed with the solar and lunar cycles marked by the stones themselves. The summer solstice, for instance, was not just a celestial event, it was the opening day of the trading season, a date everyone knew to meet. How did this system prevent conflict and build trust among potentially rival groups? The shared ritual created a temporary but powerful social bond. By eating from the same feast and participating in the same ceremonies, strangers became partners in a divine endeavor. The act of sharing a meal under the watchful eyes of the ancestors and the aligned stones made a broken promise unthinkable, a spiritual transgression with dire consequences. This is where figures like shamans or tribal leaders became essential. They acted as the mediators of these exchanges, blessed the goods, and ensured the rituals were performed correctly, lending their spiritual authority to guarantee fair dealing. Anthropologist Brian Hayden sees this as a foundational mechanism for redistributing wealth and cementing alliances in societies without formal currencies or courts. A powerful leader could host a great feast, display his wealth and generosity, and in doing so, attract more followers and more favorable trade terms. This fusion was a global phenomenon. Far across the ocean, the Mayan ball courts, often situated near their own stone circles and pyramids, served an identical dual purpose. The thrilling and often deadly ritual ball game was a reenactment of cosmic myths, but the crowds it drew also created a perfect opportunity for trading highly prized goods like jade and cacao beans. The game settled disputes not with warfare, but with a sacred contest after which the losing side might still profit from the bustling market. This deep intertwining of economy and spirituality speaks to a fundamental aspect of human nature. We have always sought to build trust and community around shared beliefs, using ritual to smooth the inherently risky business of exchange with strangers. The stone circles provided the perfect stage for this ancient drama, where faith and futures were traded side by side. These coastal stones were lighthouses long before the invention of fire. For ancient sailors navigating by the sun and stars, a distinctive ring of stones on a headland was an unmistakable landmark, a welcome sign of a safe harbor and a place to trade. Circles like those dotting the rugged coast of Brittany in France were not built inland by chance. They stand as sentinels overlooking the sea, their positions carefully chosen to be visible from miles out, guiding wooden vessels through treacherous waters to sheltered coves. This was not casual coastal hopping, it was a structured maritime highway. Archaeologists find the physical proof in the mud of these ancient bays, the remains of wooden jetties and stone-built piers lying in the silt near these circles, turning them from lonely monuments into bustling ports of call. The very goods found at these sites tell a tale of the sea. Excavations reveal spices that could only have grown in the arid climates of the Middle East, and finely woven textiles whose dyes were sourced from Mediterranean mollusks. These were not items carried overland in a peddler's pack. They were the cargo of ships. Maritime archaeologist Sean McGrail dedicated his career to understanding these early voyages, demonstrating how sailors used the alignment of the stones with certain stars to calibrate their course across open water. A stone circle could serve as a fixed reference point, allowing a navigator to check their position after days out of sight of land. The evidence is also carved into the stones themselves. At sites in Scandinavia and the Orkney Islands, you find ancient depictions of boats scratched into the megaliths, a permanent record of the vessels that made this entire system possible. These carvings are more than art, they are acknowledgments of the lifeblood of the community, the ships that connected them to a wider world. Consider the talayots of Menorca, massive stone towers that share a striking architectural kinship with similar structures in Sardinia and even further afield in North Africa. These were not isolated fortresses, they were nodes in a Mediterranean-wide network. Goods and ideas moved between these points, with North African ivory and ostrich eggshells turning up in Spanish tombs, and Iberian metalwork appearing on the African coast. Why was this maritime link so revolutionary? It allowed for the movement of bulk goods that would have been impossible to transport overland. Heavy cargoes of copper ingots, large quantities of grain, and delicate pottery could be shipped in volume, making trade far more efficient and profitable. The development of larger, more seaworthy boats was directly driven by this economic incentive. The coastal circles, therefore, were not passive landmarks. They were active engines of technological and economic change, their presence encouraging the very seafaring advances that would eventually bind continents together. A trader's cargo was not always something you could hold in your hand. Alongside amber and copper traveled something far more powerful, a complete set of spiritual beliefs, a new way of seeing the world that would be carved into the very stones of a circle for generations to come. The exchange of ideologies was the invisible currency of these ancient routes, a trade in concepts that reshaped humanity's relationship with the cosmos. A merchant from the East might arrive at a circle in Western Europe carrying more than just goods. He carried the story of a powerful solar deity, a god who died and was reborn with the seasons. This narrative, so compelling and universal, was then adopted by the local community and expressed in their own monuments. This is why we see such startling parallels in symbols separated by vast oceans. The sun cross, a circle divided by a cross, appears not only in the stone circles of Europe but in the art of ancient India and in the medicine wheels of North America. It is a symbol of the four seasons, the four directions, and the life-giving sun, a concept so fundamental it traveled effortlessly along the same paths as obsidian and salt. Historians like David Lewis Williams suggest that these shared motifs, from spirals that represent journeys into the spirit world to concentric circles that may depict portals to other realms, point to a universal human experience. Yet it was trade that gave these universal experiences a common vocabulary, a shared set of symbols that different cultures could recognize and understand. The spread of megalithic culture itself is a testament to this. The great river valleys like the Danube acted as superhighways for ideas. From the shores of the Black Sea, the concept of building massive stone tombs and temples for ancestor worship traveled upstream, carried by traders and migrants into the heart of Europe. A local chieftain might hear tales of these powerful ancestor spirits and decide that his own lineage deserved such a permanent, imposing home. The stone circle became the perfect canvas for these new beliefs. Its circular form mirrored the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth that was central to so many of these early religions. The alignment of the stones with the solstice sun physically demonstrated the power of a solar deity. Why were these circles so ideal for expressing these imported beliefs? Because they were already centers of community and convergence. A new spiritual idea introduced at a trade gathering found a ready-made audience, and its symbolism, once carved into the standing stones, became a permanent part of the local landscape. This was a spiritual revolution funded by commerce, where the thirst for new goods walked hand in hand with a thirst for new meaning, forever linking the marketplace to the temple. The stones were not just monuments, they were ancient universities. A master builder from the Mediterranean arriving at a circle in northern Europe would have brought more than exotic goods. He carried an entire mental toolkit of advanced techniques. The rapid spread of copper metallurgy from the Near East into Europe is a perfect example of this knowledge transfer. The idea of heating rock to extract a shiny, malleable metal did not occur to every culture independently at the same time. It was a revolutionary technology that traveled, moving hand over hand along the same established routes used for trading amber and obsidian. The stone circles, as neutral gathering places, became the perfect venues for demonstrating these new skills. An artisan could show local smiths how to build a hotter furnace or how to cast an axe head in a stone mold, innovations that would have seemed like pure magic. Archaeologist V. Gordon Childer called this the Neolithic Revolution, a period where trade didn't just move objects, it moved the very ideas that transformed daily life. The adoption of the wheel and axle, for instance, likely spread from Central Asia into Europe not as a toy, but as a revolutionary solution for moving the massive stones used in the circles themselves. This created a feedback loop of innovation. The technology acquired through trade was then used to build even more impressive monuments, which in turn attracted more trade and more new ideas. Why did these advances follow the trade route so precisely? Because the circles were hubs of concentrated human interaction. They were places where practical problems were solved collectively. A farmer struggling with a wooden plow that constantly broke in tough soil might see a trader using a copper-tipped ard, a simple but transformative improvement. He would learn how to make one or trade for it, and that single innovation would increase his harvest, creating more surplus to trade, fueling the entire economic system. The magnificent temples of Malta stand as a case study. Their sophisticated corbelled roofs, where each stone layer slightly overhangs the one below to form a ceiling, represent a leap in engineering. This technique has striking parallels to structures in the Aegean, suggesting that the Maltese builders did not invent it in isolation. They learned it, perhaps from seafaring traders who shared blueprints and building secrets at the sacred sites that doubled as ports. The circles fostered innovation because they were places of trust. Sharing a dangerous and valuable technological secret required a guarantee of safety and mutual benefit, something the sacred, neutral ground of the circle provided. This was not espionage, it was open-source collaboration in a prehistoric world, where a better way to polish an axe or shape a pot could ripple across a continent within a few generations, all because people met under the watchful eyes of the standing stones. Moving a 30-ton stone was an act of faith that required an army. The sheer scale of labor at a place like Karnak, where thousands of stones stand in silent rows, is almost unimaginable. This was not a project for a single village. It was a regional undertaking that required feeding, housing, and coordinating a workforce of thousands for years. Where did the authority to command such an effort come from? It sprang directly from the new economies of trade. A chieftain who controlled the flow of prized goods, like alpine jade or Baltic amber, could amass a surplus of wealth. This wealth was not hoarded in a chest. It was converted into social power, used to feed volunteer laborers, to reward skilled artisans with exotic gifts, and to create an obligation that bound the community to the project. Anthropologist Timothy Earle argues that it was this very accumulation of surplus, generated by long-distance trade, that made the megaliths possible. The stones were not built on empty stomachs. They were built on grain shipped from fertile regions, on herds of cattle driven to the site for slaughter, all paid for by the profits of exchange. How did a leader persuade people to drop their plows and push a rock for months? He did not command them, he fed them. He organized great feasts at the worksite, distributing food and rare trinkets, turning back breaking labor into a celebrated communal event that reinforced his status and generosity. The evidence for this social hierarchy is etched into the landscape itself. Near the great stone rows of Karnak, archaeologists have identified the remains of temporary labor camps, with fire pits and post holes for shelters, alongside permanent elite residences, suggesting a clear division between the organizers and the workforce. These leaders were likely the same individuals who brokered trade deals, their authority cemented by their ability to provide access to foreign luxuries and essential resources. This system created a powerful feedback loop. The successful construction of a monumental circle enhanced the leader's prestige, which attracted more trade to his territory, which in turn gave him even greater resources to fund the next ambitious project. Consider the Moai of Easter Island, a powerful parallel though not a circle. The island's society was organized around clans that competed to erect the largest statues, a competition fueled by a form of trade in resources and specialized knowledge. The rival chiefs used these monuments as displays of their mana, or spiritual power, which was directly linked to their control over the island's economy. The stone circles of Europe functioned in a similar way. They were the ultimate public works projects, physical proof of a leader's reach and influence. This early form of governance, funded by global trade, reveals a profound truth about human society. Our greatest communal achievements, the structures that define civilizations, were never just about faith or brute force. They were made possible by intricate economic networks that empowered a few to inspire the many, turning the dream of a monument into a reality of coordinated human effort. The bones themselves tell a final, intimate story of connection. Archaeogenetics now reads the human remains buried at these sites, revealing ancestry that stretches across continents. A skeleton resting for millennia beside a stone circle in Britain carries genetic markers linking it not to local populations, but to groups from the coast of modern-day Spain. This is not an isolated case. Scientists analyze ancient DNA, focusing on specific sequences passed down through maternal and paternal lines, known as haplogroups. These genetic roadmaps trace the journeys of individuals and their families over thousands of years. The data shows a clear pattern. Human migration followed the exact same paths as the trade in amber, copper, and stone. When farmers from Anatolia in modern-day Turkey spread into Europe, they did not move blindly. They traveled along established exchange networks, their arrival marked by both new pottery styles and the construction of megalithic tombs. Geneticist David Reich and his team have published extensive data showing these waves of movement, linking the dispersal of people directly to the spread of megalithic culture. It was not just ideas moving, it was people. A powerful case study comes from the Iberian Peninsula. At the colossal Anta Grande do Zambujeiro, a massive dolmen in Portugal, genetic analysis of human remains revealed a surprising ancestry component from North Africa. This finding suggests that traders and perhaps entire families were crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, settling and integrating with local communities. Their distinctive genetic signature became woven into the fabric of the population, a permanent biological record of that ancient crossing. How did this movement of people reshape cultures? It created a profound blend. A child born at a trading hub might inherit the physical features of a mother from the European interior and a father from the Mediterranean coast, growing up in a world that mixed local traditions with imported beliefs. These genetic exchanges were the ultimate form of cultural transfer, more enduring than any traded object. The stones were not just waypoints for merchants, they were homelands for a new, interconnected people. Mapping the locations of stone circles against the Silk Road reveals a startling truth. These prehistoric networks were not just precursors, they were a global phenomenon operating on a similar scale thousands of years earlier. The Silk Road is famous for connecting China to Rome, but the routes marked by standing stones formed an equally vast web, linking the British Isles to the Mediterranean and the Baltic to the Black Sea. Both systems shared a core function. They were conduits for more than just merchandise. Just as silk and spices moved west while glass and gold moved east along the Silk Road, amber and copper traveled north while ideas and technologies flowed south along the megalithic routes. The key similarity lies in their role as engines of cultural exchange. A Buddhist statue found in Egypt or Chinese silk in a Roman grave mirrors the alpine jade in an Irish tomb or Mediterranean shells in a German circle. These objects are proof of conversations that stretched across continents. Historian Peter Frankopan emphasizes that these early networks laid the logistical and cultural groundwork for the empires that would follow. The stones did not just mark a path for goods, they paved the way for civilization itself. Consider the Incan road network, a breathtaking system of highways spanning the Andes. While built millennia later and with more advanced engineering, it served an identical purpose to the megalithic routes. Both networks used waypoints for the Incas. It was tambos or rest houses spaced a day's journey apart. For the megalithic traders, it was the stone circles themselves, providing neutral ground for rest, exchange, and ritual. In the vast deserts, caravans relied on oases marked by distinctive stone cairns, a direct parallel to the circles that guided travelers across the treeless plains of northern Europe. The Amber Road is an even more direct comparison. This well-documented route brought Baltic amber south to the Mediterranean. Its path is conspicuously dotted with megalithic monuments, showing that the stone circles were integral components of a system that would later be formalized and given a name. These networks were not isolated inventions. They represent a universal human solution to the challenges of long-distance trade. They all required safe passage, reliable meeting points, and a way to build trust between strangers. What do these comparisons teach us about the universal patterns of trade? They reveal that globalization is not a modern invention. The fundamental principles of connecting supply with demand, of moving luxury goods to create social status, and of exchanging ideas alongside objects are as old as the stones themselves. The duration of these networks is key. The Silk Road operated for over 1,000 years. The megalithic trade network, as evidenced by the continual use and modification of circles, persisted for at least 2 millennia, an astonishing span of time. This was not a fleeting moment of connection, it was a sustained and resilient system. In Mesopotamia, the great ziggurats stood as monuments of power and commerce, while in Europe, the stone circles served a parallel role. Both used massive architecture to mark centers of economic and spiritual activity, attracting trade from far and wide. This parallel development across the world suggests a deep-seated human impulse. When we gather to trade, we build monuments to sanctify and solidify our connections. The stone circles were the first Silk Road, a network woven not from silk but from stone and shared belief, proving that the drive to connect our world is etched into the very foundation of human history. A polished stone spindle wall rests beside a woman's skeleton, a silent testament to her work. For too long, the story of ancient trade was told as a saga of male merchants and chieftains, but the graves themselves tell a different story. At stone circles across Europe, women were buried with exotic goods that speak of far-reaching connections. In Nordic regions, a woman might be interred within a sacred stone setting, wearing delicate amber beads from the Baltic or distinctive copper bracelets from the Alps. These were not merely decorative gifts from male relatives. They were personal possessions, markers of her own status and her direct access to the networks that brought these treasures north. The tools of their trades accompanied them to the afterlife. Excavations frequently uncover carefully placed weaving equipment, polished bone needles, and finely crafted shuttles buried alongside women. These were not simple domestic implements. The production of high-quality textiles was a form of industry, and the cloth itself was a highly valued commodity for trade. A woman who could produce a finely woven, patterned fabric was creating wealth, tangible goods that could be exchanged at the circle for that imported amber or metal. Archaeologist Marija Gimbut has long argued that women in these Neolithic societies were central to both economic and spiritual life, and the evidence from these burials confirms it. They were producers, traders, and custodians of knowledge. Why were their contributions so easily overlooked by earlier generations of archaeologists? The bias was in the interpretation. A sword in a grave was seen as proof of a warrior's power, but a set of weaving tools was often dismissed as mere housekeeping. We now understand that the loom was as vital to the economy as the forge. A powerful case study emerges from the Bretagne circles in Peru. Here, female mummies were discovered with elaborate textiles and valuable spondylus shells, a vibrant red mollusk that could only be sourced from the warm coastal waters hundreds of miles away. These women were not passive recipients. They were key figures in a trade network that connected the highlands to the coast, likely controlling the flow of these spiritually significant goods. Their presence at the circle was active, not ceremonial. They would have been bartering their own textiles and pottery, negotiating deals, and forging the social alliances that made long-distance trade possible. How did this economic role empower women? Control over the production and exchange of such valued goods granted them social influence, a voice in community decisions, and a legacy etched in stone and bone. This perspective fundamentally enriches our understanding of these early economies. The stone circle was not just a stage for male ambition. It was a vibrant marketplace where gender dynamics were complex and where women stood as essential architects of the first global trade. The hoofbeats of ancient cattle still echo in the soil around these stone circles. Herds of animals were the original mobile wealth, driven along well-worn paths that converged on the megalithic sites, transforming them into bustling seasonal markets. The evidence lies in the bones themselves, where zooarchaeologists like Juliet Clutton-Brock sift through millennia of debris to read this story of hooves and horns. Enclosures and droveways discovered near circles in the British Isles reveal a landscape organized for moving and managing livestock. These were not random gatherings, but structured events where cattle and sheep were central commodities, traded for their meat, milk, and immense value as draft animals. The stone circle provided the neutral ground where different pastoral groups could meet without conflict, their economic interests sanctified by the shared ritual space. These animals served multiple, intertwined purposes. A prime bullock could be bartered for a polished jade axe head, its value measured in the labor it could provide or the status its ownership conferred. Sheep were not just for wool, but for a steady supply of milk and manure that enriched nearby fields, creating agricultural surpluses that further fueled trade. The most compelling evidence comes from the vast deposits of animal bones found at sites like the stones of Stonehenge in Orkney. Here, the remains of hundreds of cattle, predominantly young males, point to massive recurring feasts. These were not simple meals, they were grand communal events where the ritual slaughter and consumption of prized animals cemented social bonds and displayed the host's wealth and generosity. The act of feasting turned living capital into social capital, forging the trust necessary for complex trade agreements. The very locations of these circles often trace the lines of ancient herding routes. In the now arid Sahara, stone circles stand as silent waypoints on paths that once guided the trade of goats and, later, camels between oases during a wetter climatic phase. These routes were dictated by the needs of the herds, access to water and grazing, and the circles provided the known destination, the guaranteed meeting point at the journey's end. This movement of animals had a profound environmental impact. Pollen records near these sites often show a decline in certain tree species and an increase in grasses, indicating widespread forest clearance to create pastureland. The success of the trade network, driven by the demand for livestock, began to reshape the very ecology of continents, creating a managed landscape that supported both the monuments and the people who built them. The polished jade axe was not just a tool, it was a promise. For ancient societies, the stone circle was a neutral stage where rival chieftains could meet without losing face, their power balanced by the sacred ground beneath their feet. This system of exchange was not always peaceful. Archaeologists find the scars of conflict etched into the landscape, with defensive earthworks and hilltop fortifications often built near these same circles, guarding access to the valuable trade routes. Competition for control over a prime source of obsidian, that razor-sharp volcanic glass, could spark raids and territorial disputes. The very scarcity that made these goods valuable also made them worth fighting for. Yet, the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that the long-term effect of this trade was a reduction in violence. Historian Ian Morris points to a crucial shift as societies enmeshed in these networks developed more complex structures. It became far more profitable to trade with your neighbor than to raid them. A successful raid might yield a one-time haul, but a stable trade partnership yielded a continuous flow of wealth and new technologies. How did the circles themselves enforce this fragile peace? They were places of ritual truce, the act of exchanging gifts under the watchful eyes of the ancestors and the aligned heavens created a powerful social contract. A broken oath here was not just a personal betrayal, it was a cosmic offense. This duality is perfectly captured in the Maltese temples. For centuries, these islanders built in glorious isolation, their unique architecture reflecting a singular culture. Then, suddenly, artifacts from Sicily and beyond begin to appear in their sacred spaces. This was not an invasion. It was an opening, a conscious decision to engage with the wider world, likely because the benefits of imported goods and ideas outweighed the risks of outside influence. The trade in obsidian tells a similar story of tension and resolution. A tribe controlling the only source of this superior material held immense power, a temptation to dominate. Yet, by allowing access and trading it freely at the circles, they could build a web of alliances far stronger than any temporary military advantage. They transformed a potential weapon into a tool for diplomacy. Why does this ancient balance between conflict and cooperation matter to us today? Because it reveals a fundamental truth about human progress. Our first global economy was not born from a utopian dream of harmony, but from a hard-nosed realization that connection is more sustainable than conquest. The stones stand as permanent reminders that our greatest networks were built not on force, but on a calculated and often fragile trust. The stones did not fall silent all at once. Their decline was a slow fading, a gradual shift in the rhythm of the world. As the climate grew colder and wetter in many regions around 4,000 years ago, the old routes became more difficult. Pastures shrank, and the predictable gatherings at the solstice markers grew smaller, then ceased altogether. But the primary force of change was technological. The discovery of how to alloy copper with tin to create bronze ignited a new age. Bronze was superior to stone in almost every way for tools and weapons, and its production required a different kind of network, one focused on sourcing two distinct metals from often distant locations. The old trade in polished stone axes and ceremonial amber could not compete. The great stone circles, once the hubs of a continent-spanning economy, were gradually abandoned. Archaeologists see this clearly in the layers of soil. The deposits of exotic goods thin out and then stop. No new stones were raised. The knowledge of their precise celestial alignments faded from memory, becoming legend instead of practical calendar. The circles stood empty, their purpose forgotten by the generations that followed. Why would a society cling to a stone calendar when new metal tools allowed for more intensive farming and new ways of marking time? The economic heart had simply moved elsewhere. Yet, the legacy of these networks proved incredibly resilient. The routes themselves remained, those ancient paths worn deep by the feet of traders and the hooves of their cattle, often became the foundation for later roads. Historian Barry Cunliffe has meticulously traced how many Roman roads, engineered for legions and imperial messengers, followed the exact course of these prehistoric trackways. The Romans were practical. They built their empire on the most efficient routes, and those routes had been mapped out by megalithic traders millennia before. The locations held their power too. A sacred circle that had drawn people for trade for 1,000 years often became the site of a medieval market town. The town square, with its bustling weekly market, was the direct descendant of the neutral ground once sanctified by standing stones. You can see this continuity in places like Avebury in England, where a village grew up within the great stone circle itself, its streets following the ancient processional ways. Stones from fallen circles were frequently quarried by later peoples, not out of disrespect, but because their obvious importance made them potent symbols for new beliefs. A single standing menhir might be carved with a Christian cross, physically repurposing the old power for a new god. In Brittany, many of the great stones were reused in the construction of castles and churches, literally building the new world from the bones of the old. This was not destruction, it was transformation. The collapse of the megalithic trade network was not a failure. It was a necessary evolution. The system had become a victim of its own success, fostering the very innovations in metallurgy and transportation that would eventually make its central hubs obsolete. The stones had connected the world, and in doing so, they created a more complex world that no longer needed them in the same way. Their silence marked not an end, but a transition, a passing of the torch to the empires and economies that would rise from the paths they had first carved into the earth. A laser pulse from a drone strikes the forest floor, and on a screen, a ghost appears. Modern archaeology is no longer just about the trowel and brush. It is a high-tech detective agency using tools that see through soil and time. LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, fires millions of laser pulses from an aircraft, digitally stripping away dense vegetation to map the ground beneath. In the thick rainforests of the Amazon, this technology has revealed vast geometric earthworks, circles and squares that were completely invisible from the ground, hinting at a complex, previously unknown society that must have been connected by its own trade routes. This is not just finding new sites, it is finding a new map of the human past. Ground-penetrating radar works like a medical scanner for the Earth, sending radio waves into the soil and reading the echoes to create a picture of buried walls, pits, and post holes without ever breaking the ground. At the famous Ring of Brodgar in Scotland, this radar has mapped out a sprawling complex of hidden structures and processional pathways, turning a solitary circle into the center of a lost ceremonial landscape. How does this change our understanding of trade? By revealing the infrastructure, the guest houses, the storage pits, and the workshops that supported the great gatherings. These were not just empty fields with stones, they were bustling, organized centers. The evidence is no longer just in the artifacts, it is in the data. In Turkey, at the site of Göbekli Tepe, advanced thermoluminescence dating has precisely pinned the construction of its massive T-shaped pillars to over 11,000 years ago. This new, accurate timeline reveals that these sophisticated builders were contemporaries of the earliest farmers in Mesopotamia, and chemical analysis of obsidian tools found on site proves they were trading with settlements hundreds of miles away. This rewrites the history books, placing long-distance exchange at the very dawn of civilization. Archaeologist Christian Christiansen uses strontium isotope analysis on human teeth, a technique that reads the geological signature of the water and food a person consumed in childhood. Applying this to skeletons buried at stone circles across Europe, he has proven that many individuals were not local. They were migrants or travelers who grew up in different valleys on different coasts, their lives a testament to constant movement. What new secrets will we uncover as these tools become more powerful? The stones have been waiting for us to learn how to listen, and now, with these technological ears, we can finally hear their stories. A modern pilgrim stands where an ancient trader once stood, their journey now fueled by curiosity rather than commerce. This global fascination with stone circles has created a new kind of exchange, one of knowledge and resources dedicated to preservation. Millions of visitors now walk the perimeter of sites like Stonehenge each year, their entrance fees directly funding the science that unravels the monument's secrets. This sustainable cultural tourism represents a profound shift, transforming these places from silent ruins into living classrooms where the story of the first global economy is finally being told. Organizations like UNESCO have designated many of these sites as World Heritage, a status that not only honors their universal value but mobilizes international expertise and funds for their protection. In the lush hills of Maharashtra, India, the ancient stone circles of Junapani were threatened by encroaching development. A coordinated preservation project, supported by global heritage grants and local volunteers, carefully cleared the land, documented the stones, and installed subtle signage. Now, visitors learn not only about the local burial practices, but also about the carnelian beads and copper artifacts found there, objects that whisper of trade with distant civilizations. This is the dual power of thoughtful tourism. It generates the money needed to shield the stones while educating a global public about their true significance as nodes of a prehistoric network. Yet, every footstep carries a cost. The very act of love that draws us to these sites also threatens them. soil compaction from countless visitors can damage the buried archaeology, that context we have not yet learned to read. The challenge for conservationists is a delicate balancing act. How do we allow access without causing irreversible harm? The answer is emerging through innovation and community. In the Boyne Valley of Ireland, community-led initiatives have trained local residents as tour guides. These guides do not just recite memorized dates, they share deep local lore, direct visitors to less vulnerable pathways, and instill a sense of shared guardianship. They explain how the Great Tomb of Newgrange was not an isolated temple, but a destination on a trade route for gold and amber. When a visitor hears that story from someone whose family has lived in the shadow of the stones for generations, the connection to the past becomes tangible. Our responsibility is to be mindful travelers, not just consumers of history. The question is no longer simply what these stones can tell us about the past, but what our stewardship of them will tell future generations about our own values. These monuments survived millennia of changing climates and societies, only to face their greatest test in our era of mass movement. The stones that once guided ancient traders now guide our modern conscience, challenging us to ensure that the silent sentinels of our shared human journey endure for another 1,000 years. The silent stones cannot speak, but the theories built around them create a vibrant conversation. Scholars piece together the evidence like a vast, fragmented puzzle, with each theoretical framework offering a different lens through which to view the same stones. One powerful model is world systems theory, which imagines the ancient economy as a web of cores and peripheries. In this view, certain regions like the resource-rich Eastern Mediterranean might have acted as a core, demanding raw materials like amber or copper from peripheral areas like Northern Europe. The stone circles, then, were not just local temples but the outposts of this system, places where local elites controlled the flow of goods to the cosmopolitan center. Yet this model has its critics. It can feel too rigid, too reminiscent of modern colonial empires, potentially overlooking the agency of the local communities, who are not merely passive suppliers but active participants shaping the trade to their own advantage. A radically different perspective comes from the ritual economy model. Here, the exchange was not primarily about material wealth but about spiritual and social capital. The movement of a polished jade axe was less a commercial transaction and more a sacred gift, cementing an alliance between clans or fulfilling an obligation to the ancestors. In this framework, the stone circle was a theater for these performances of generosity and power. The value of an object was not in its utility but in its story, its connection to a distant, powerful place. Proponents of this view, drawing on the work of anthropologists like Marcel Mauss, argue that this gift economy created bonds that a purely commercial relationship could not. A case study of the German circles demonstrates how these models can clash and complement. A world systems theorist might see a circle in the Harz Mountains as a node for exporting local flint. A ritual economy scholar would point to the same circle's precise lunar alignments and the ceremonial deposition of those flint tools, arguing that their true value was symbolic, used in rituals that united the community. Most archaeologists today, like Timothy Darville, advocate for a more integrated approach. They propose that these circles were multifunctional spaces where economics, ritual, and politics were inseparable. A trade fair was a religious festival, and a political alliance was sealed with a ceremonial gift. This complexity defies any single, simple explanation. Why do we need this plurality of theories? Because the past was just as complicated as the present. Each model illuminates a different facet of the truth, like turning a prism to see the full spectrum of light within. A purely economic model might explain how a piece of Baltic amber reached Malta, but only a ritual model can explain why it was placed so carefully in a dark tomb, a final offering to the dead. These competing interpretations do not weaken our understanding, they enrich it, forcing us to think critically about the motivations that drove our ancestors to connect their world, reminding us that the seeds of our global economy were sown in a soil mingled with both commerce and faith. The stories are still told where the stones still stand. Indigenous oral histories carry the living memory of these ancient places, offering a dimension of understanding that archaeology alone cannot reach. An Anishinaabe elder might speak of a ring of stones not as a ruin, but as a place called Muzanabikan, a teaching rock where their ancestors gathered to trade copper from the Great Lakes for shells from the distant coasts. These are not vague legends, but detailed accounts of routes, relationships, and the rituals that made exchange possible. For the Maori of New Zealand, ancestral traditions, or Purakau, describe great ocean-going waka, their voyages marked by standing stones on headlands that served as navigational aids and signposts to sheltered trading bays. These stories provide names for the nameless and intentions for the inscrutable. Anthropologist Keith Basso profoundly documented how, for many indigenous cultures, the landscape itself is a repository of history. A stone is not an object in the land, it is a participant in a story that is continuously retold, its meaning embodied and performed with each recitation. This embodied knowledge offers a crucial check and balance to the archaeological record. Where a scientist might see a post hole, a traditional story might explain it as the place where the welcoming lodge was built for visiting traders. The two perspectives are not in conflict, they are in conversation, each filling the gaps in the other. The ethical integration of this knowledge requires a posture of respect and partnership, not extraction. It means listening to the voices of the communities for whom these sites are not just historical curiosities but sacred, living parts of their cultural identity. The challenge lies in honoring the different ways of knowing. A carbon date gives one form of truth, a precise year. A song cycle about the journey to the stone circle gives another, the truth of experience and meaning. How do we weigh the scientific measurement of a solstice alignment against a story that has preserved that same alignment in its narrative for 1,000 years? They are two pathways to the same destination. In Australia, Aboriginal dreaming stories describe the creation of stone arrangements by ancestral beings, and these same arrangements often align with paths to sources of prized ochre or other trade goods. The story is the map, and the ceremony performed at the circle renews the connection to both the land and its economic history. By welcoming these diverse voices, we do not narrow the story of the first global trade, we expand it into a richer, more human symphony. It transforms the silent, monolithic circle from a puzzle to be solved into a place that was, and for some still is, alive with memory and purpose. A jungle vine is cut away to reveal a carved stone surface, a circle lost for millennia. This is the future of discovery, where the next generation of archaeologists will not only find new monuments but entirely new maps of the ancient world. The greatest mysteries of the stone circles are no longer buried in the past. They await in remote jungles beneath coastal waters and across the vast, unstudied steppes of Central Asia. Each new site has the potential to shatter our current understanding, revealing trade routes we never dreamed existed. The unanswered questions are as massive as the stones themselves. We still do not know the exact mechanisms of trade, the handshakes and negotiations that moved a ton of rock from Wales to England. Was it a chain of gift-giving between allied chiefs, or a more formal system of barter with agreed-upon values? The role of climate change is another profound puzzle. We see the networks expand during warm, wet periods and contract when the climate turned harsh, but did a sudden drought cause the entire system to collapse, or did it simply force trade to find new paths? Emerging technologies are the keys to these locks. Artificial intelligence can now analyze the global distribution of artifacts, spotting subtle patterns in the data that a human eye would miss. An eye might correlate a specific type of pottery decoration in Turkey with a unique stone tool shape in Scotland, suggesting a direct cultural link that was previously invisible. Ground-penetrating radar and LIDAR will expose the hidden footprints of these routes, showing the temporary camps and storage pits that connected one circle to the next. Interdisciplinary collaboration is turning guesswork into science. Geologists, geneticists, climatologists, and computer scientists are now working alongside archaeologists, creating a holistic picture of the past. Experts predict this combined effort could double our knowledge of these ancient networks within just a few decades. One of the most thrilling hypotheses involves transoceanic trade. Could there have been contact, however indirect, between the megalithic builders of Europe and other great stone-working cultures? Consider the possibility of circles high in the Andes, their positions aligning not just with mountain peaks, but with points on the coast that served as hubs for Pacific trade. Did maritime routes connect South America to distant islands, exchanging ideas as well as goods? The ultimate mystery is what these future finds will reveal about ourselves. Every new circle uncovered, every trade route mapped, rewrites the story of human connection. The stones have kept their secrets for thousands of years, but their silence is finally beginning to break. Your own hand on a weathered stone connects you to a chain of hands that stretches back thousands of years. That cool, rough surface was touched by the merchant who bartered Baltic amber for Cornish tin, by the herder who drove his cattle to the solstice feast, and by the parent who brought their child to witness the dawn light flood a sacred chamber. These stones are not relics of a dead past, they are a mirror. Look at the device you are using right now. Its components sourced from mines and factories across a dozen different countries, assembled on another continent and delivered to your door. This is the modern version of that ancient network, a global web of exchange that connects us all. Think about the last item you purchased that came from far away. The coffee from Colombia, the spices from India, the clothing from Vietnam. Your simple act of acquisition placed you squarely within the same system that once moved alpine jade to the shores of Ireland. The scale is different, the speed is dizzying, but the fundamental human impulse is identical: the drive to acquire, to connect, to benefit from the specialized skills and resources of others. How do the ancient monuments in your own region tell a story of exchange? Perhaps your local museum holds arrowheads made from a distant quarry, or the oldest street in your town follows a path worn by medieval traders who themselves walked a route first mapped by prehistoric herders. Every landscape is layered with these invisible maps of connection. What can we learn from these early networks about building a more sustainable and equitable global economy today? The megalithic traders understood something we are struggling to remember: that trust is the ultimate currency. Their trade was built on relationships sanctified by ritual and reinforced by face-to-face meetings under the shared sky. There was a direct, tangible link between the producer, the trader, and the consumer, a connection we have lost in our complex, anonymized supply chains. The stones teach us that resilience lies in diversified routes and in fostering mutual benefit rather than pure exploitation. They persisted for millennia not through force, but through a fragile, constantly renewed consensus. We stand at a similar crossroads, looking out at a world we have woven together. Does this ancient history change your view of the modern world? Does it make our global links feel less like a recent invention and more like a deep-seated human tradition? We invite you to share your own stories in the comments below. Tell us about a local stone circle you have visited or an object you own that tells a story of long-distance travel. What does connection mean to you in this networked age? Your reflections are the next chapter in this ongoing story, a story that began when the first stone was raised to guide a traveler home. The evidence is now laid out before us, a puzzle assembled from geology, genetics, and legend. These stone circles are far more than mysterious ruins. They are the enduring archives of humanity's first global economy. They chronicle a world already woven together by routes of exchange, where the flow of amber and copper was matched by the flow of new gods and groundbreaking technologies. This ancient network laid the very groundwork for the interconnected world we inhabit today, proving that our impulse to connect is not a modern invention but a foundational human trait. This deep history invites us to look at our own global links with a new perspective. It encourages a spirit of cooperation over conflict, reminding us that the most resilient systems are built on mutual benefit and a shared sense of curiosity. Our journey through the silent testimony of the stones does not end here. If this exploration of our shared past has sparked your curiosity, we invite you to share your own reflections in the comments below. Tell us about a local monument that speaks to you of ancient connections. Subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the past together, one stone at a time. For these circles are a permanent reminder that every one of us is part of a single, sprawling human story, a journey across time and space that began when the first stone was raised to guide a traveler